Sorry, I got disconnected. Because you're going to mount a Raspberry Pi. Come on. You're going to mount a Raspberry Pi camera in the front of your cabinet. Now, I want it to go a little lower so the image will be bigger, but the problem is there is not a good place to mount it closer. If it goes all the way down here, it's too close and you can't get the full image. I found where I mounted it right here, you're able to get, from here you're able to get the full image on your DMD for all of the Pinball FX tables. And then if you play Star Wars Pinball, it actually puts it in the upper left corner so you can still see it. So this was the best I could come up with. It was just a simple like $9 Raspberry Pi camera. I mounted it with a Raspberry Pi camera holder, screwed it in, and I also double-sided Velcroed it to make it sturdy. You'll have to do some adjustments to find the right angle that works for you. It takes a little trial and error. Leave it a little bit loose though, so you're able to adjust it on the fly, because sometimes it likes to shake around. It's going to happen. It's not a big issue. It doesn't affect much. Okay, so let's go under. So here's the underside. So I've got a switch wired up to power everything on and off. This is an LED kit that I bought that has a microphone built in it. The microphone will actually hear certain feedback and make the playfield flash like a real pinball machine. It's not perfect. I'm trying to find a different way to tweak that, but so far I'm pretty happy with the result. Here's the actual microphone right here. Okay, so here's the internal workings, what everybody really wants to see. I'm not the best with wires, so cut me a little slack, but okay. So there's the analog stick. There is solenoid number 1. There is solenoid number 2. I put heat sinks on my solenoids. One of the biggest problems with solenoids, I've gone through contactors, solenoids, contactors I had a lot of problems with. There's 3 things you need to know about using an encoder board and solenoids. So they have a problem with electromagnetic discharge. There is a magnet in there that when it coils up, it creates an EMF field. When the field goes off, it will sometimes kill your encoder board. Meaning that when I started this project, it was constantly crashing the encoder board and it would say no controller found on the switch. It did it a lot. Now, I suggest when you build this, build it without the solenoids first, just to make sure everything is going right. Because when I started with this last encoder board, it was shutting off randomly. And I thought it was because of solenoids. It turns out it was just a bad encoder board. I bought another one. This one's been fine. I've had no issues with this. Anyways, so I've got my lights all wired, chain wired for LED. There's a mini bass shaker right there. Mini bass shaker right there. To get the solenoids to work with the switch, you need to, I found it on YouTube, it's kind of ingenious. You have to glue 2 micro switches back to back. One of them needs to be a long pin micro switch. I can show pictures to people if they want to know, but it's a long pin micro switch. You need to wrap it with electrical tape, and it needs to go under the other micro switch. So when you push the micro switch, it hits both of them at the same time. One of them will be going to the solenoid powered, one goes to your encoder board. That way they don't cross chatter. There's no electrical current going from the 12-volt solenoid to your encoder board. You don't want that. Number two, because of the electromagnetic feedback, as I said before, you need to wire an automotive fuse right there coming from your power, which is right there. My power comes down. I put the fuse on the hot wire. Then I split it into two. One goes to this solenoid, one goes to this solenoid. Then you need to, between each solenoid, right here and right over there, you need to wire a diode. It's a 1N4007 diode. The diode has to go between the positive and negative. The positive side needs to be the part with the stripe. It's very important. The way diodes work is if you're supposed to go to let the current flow through it, the stripe's supposed to go to the negative, towards the negative. You don't want the current to do that. You're trying to avoid the electromagnetic pulse. So you're actually going to go positive to the stripe. That way it blocks the EMF. That's what you want it to do. So you have to make sure that's wired. This other one, you don't have to do because I've done the other way. I'm doing it just for extra safety, I guess. This other one is just in between each power line. I put a resistor. It's supposed to help keep the solenoids cool by when you hold open a solenoid, so you hold the flipper down, it will actually heat up. It heats up relatively fast and gets very hot. You could actually burn your cabinet down, your house down. That's why I'm saying don't mess with this unless you really want to do this. I forgot my train of thought. The resistor will help keep it from using as much electricity when it's coiled up. It's still heated up a decent amount, more so than I was comfortable with. Hence why now there's a heat sink. That was a game changer. The heat sink actually is covering my ass for a good deal. The heat sinks are getting pretty hot. The solenoid is not, which means the solenoids won't burn out as fast. Now these solenoids are pretty cheap little 25 Newton solenoids. And what they're doing is they're tapping the inside of the cabinet wood right there and right there. And it gives you really nice tactile feedback right where your fingers are. The mini bass shakers here, when the game hits the bumpers, you will feel every single bumper. Every single thump, hum. These work extremely well. They're Dayton Audio. And they're wired straight back to this amp. Okay, so at any rate, so there's the solenoids. For my plunger solution, everybody wonders how I'm getting the plunger to work with the Switch games. Well, the other analog stick. I mounted the other analog stick on the underside of this monitor holder, and I super glued it in to where it's got free movement. You know, you have freedom of movement, but it's stuck there. And I wired thick gauge plastic wiring. Oh, and this is just a thumb cap. I super glued it on too. I noticed when you pull back, Switch analog nubs are notorious for short throws. So this adds a little more of a long throw to the analog, which helps it be more, give you a better pull, more realistic. Anyways, so you wrap the cord around and then it goes all the way to the end of the plunger, and then it's wrapped around right back here. Nice and tight. You want to have give here. You want it to be kind of loose. If it's too tight, it won't spring back properly, and it screws up the whole thing. It needs to be just a little bit loose. That way it doesn't start pulling right away, and then it'll see if I push down on this. Just like that. So you lose about 10% of your pullback, but even the arcade 1-ups are missing some of that, so that's to be expected. Anyways, so, and then back here I have a kill switch. When you wire solenoids, I suggest wiring a kill switch to turn the solenoids off if you need to for any reason. This will just shut them off. You just click it, it's off. I didn't do a great job of installing it, but I was doing a lot of stuff at the time, so. Okay, so anyways, let's turn it on. We'll go to part 3.